everyone, Flaming Geek here. I apologize in advance. I'm really sorry. I did say I would be posting my review of Star Wars, a Star Wars film, every week for the week of November up until the release day in December. Unfortunately, but fortunately at the same time, I just had a lot of stuff going down with cosplays for conventions and work and like studying for exams and stuff, so that's pretty much it. But I'm back. I am going to be posting hopefully these next videos pretty quickly, but I will be hopefully posting them as quickly as possible. It just sucks how long it takes to upload videos on YouTube. Anyhow, I know I'm not wearing a Star Wars shirt. I was just really feeling like Star Trek today because I love Star Trek. And I hope everyone enjoys my lovely Attack on Titan poster. Today I'm going to be talking about the first Star Wars episode from the prequels, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So, to start off this movie, I remember seeing this film in 1999 when it was released. I believe I was 5 years old, or I just turned 6. I just turned 6 years old. And I was brought up with the idea that when my parents showed me Star Wars for the first time, they said, like, these are some of the greatest movies ever created. And so to me, I kind of had that, like, view with Star Wars. So I was very excited for this film. I remember my family and I, we dressed up and we went to see the movie. And when I was a kid, this movie was cool, except for one major thing, which was Jar Jar Binks. I hate Jar Jar. To the people who know me very well, I started a hashtag when I had a marathon with a couple of Quidditch friends about 2 years ago with the Star Wars films, and it was "Fuck you, Jar Jar," or STU, yeah, shut the fuck up, Jar Jar. All that stuff. I hate Jar Jar, but needless to say, in this video, because that character is being bashed so many times, I am not going to bring him up. I'll maybe say his name here and there where the character is removing which characters were in which scene, but I won't hate on Jar Jar. So when I saw that film, my brother loved Jar Jar. I didn't, but I loved Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson's like one of my favorite actors even as a kid, and I loved Ewan McGregor, so I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it was a neat film. But going back and watching it, it is one of the prequel films that, aside Revenge of the Sith, that I watch frequently. I don't watch Attack of the Clones. I've only seen Attack of the Clones, including the one I did for the review. I've only seen that movie 3 times ever. Once in theaters, once because I did a marathon with friends, and then for the review. So needless to say, I have watched Phantom Menace many times, and what's interesting was watching it again and analyzing it properly. I realized, yeah, you definitely don't need to watch Phantom Menace. The stuff that happens in it barely touched upon in Attack of the Clones. You can really just remove this one and move on. But needless to say, it's an interesting film. So what I found really cool is when they were making this film, George Lucas wanted to utilize a lot of CGI, which is very apparent when you watch the film. It's very dated. So there were not very many sets built, and the sets were only built to be a specific height, which Liam Neeson is, he's a tall man. I forget how tall he is, like 6'3" or something. So when they shot the cameras for him, like they had to like extend the footage a little bit just so that they could capture him in the frame properly, because the sets weren't built to be that tall, which is very interesting. Because you would think with like the amount of money that Star Wars has made, and George Lucas being like basically a billionaire, that money would be put into making like these sets, which of course that didn't happen, as we know. So to start off with this movie, I found the intro to Phantom Menace, rewatching it, to be very interesting. We're thrown into this political scenario in which Chancellor Valorum commissions 2 Jedi Knights, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, to go and negotiate with the Trade Federation to stop a blockade in Naboo. Wow, politics already. If that's the prequels are all politics, basically. Very different from the original films, but it's still there. So I found the intro of the Jedi pretty neat because like they come in and Qui-Gon's like, I sense a disturbance in the Force, and then you get to see them fight off battle droids, which first make their appearance in this film because, of course, the Trade Federation, they are linked with Darth Sidious, and Newt Gunray is ordered by Darth Sidious to kill the Jedi and go ahead and invade Naboo. So that brings us down to Naboo. The Jedi infiltrate one of the ships and they're taken down to Naboo. And of course, Qui-Gon Jinn saves a pitiful creature's life, that being Jar Jar. And as a result, they're taken into the underground city of Naboo, which is the Gungans. And Qui-Gon attempts to negotiate with Big Boss Nass, the leader of the Gungans, to help their the Earthers above them, which are the Nabooians? Yes, the Naboo people. However, Boss Nass says no, but he does provide them with a ship. Because there's a lot of like political tension between the Gungans and the Naboos. Naboos thinking they're higher than the Gungans and such, and Gungans being thought as not as intelligent. So they're taken into, I found the underground city of Naboo to be actually pretty neat. Even as a kid when I watched it, I was like, man, that's pretty cool. That's a really neat concept. So Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Jar Jar, they take a ship to go to the surface of Naboo to go and meet up with Queen Amidala. And I found that whole underwater scene really pointless watching it. I never liked it as a kid. I thought it was kind of boring and lame, especially when it's like just a bunch of actors sitting in the screen and being like, whoa, this is going on. It felt very like video gamey to me, but the soundtrack and the score by John Williams, I thought that was pretty neat and made it seem a little mysterious. The Jedi arrive and they rescue Queen Amidala, and they manage to get her across the blockade because at this point the Trade Federation has invaded the planet of Naboo. And so the most important thing would be to save the Queen because they need her for negotiations. They need her to be a voice in the Senate. And so she's taken off the planet, and as a result, them leaving the blockade on her starship, it's a pretty neat escape. I like the escape. I like the fact that they introduced R2 that way. It was a very neat way to introduce like one of the best characters of the series, which is this droid, one of the most famous and iconic things from Star Wars, this astromech droid, which is R2-D2. I thought that was really cool watching him fix the ship, and you kind of have like a little bit of like proud moment there because you're like, oh yeah, they're like, that little droid got her back up. And you're like, yeah, R2. So I thought that was pretty neat. And it was nice, as a result of their ship needing a new part, they decided to emergency land on Tatooine, which I thought was pretty nice too, because then you kind of get to see how they connect Luke's home planet, and then you kind of see how they can build on introducing Anakin into the storyline. So I thought it was pretty neat. The majority of the story does take place on Tatooine. I think a lot of it is really dull and boring. But it is necessary to the plot. A lot of people do hate on young Anakin Skywalker. They say he's a horrible actor, but then I like to think, like, how many good child actors are there? There aren't that many. It's very hard. So that's kind of like me trying to be like devil's advocate in that. But I do agree. I think it would have been more interesting if Anakin wasn't so young. Then maybe if he was closer to Padme's age, then maybe the romance wouldn't be so creepy. And I don't understand, like, I understand Lucas wanted him to be young, but like, why did he have to be like basically 9 years old in this film? It would have worked out fine if he was 14 years old. Also, I didn't realize, watching this film, I realized then, oh my gosh, Padme is so boring. Just, yeah. Even Queen Amidala, even the double, boring. Like, as a kid, I thought it was cool because I was like, whoa, look at the costumes, look at the makeup. Wow, she's so awesome. But watching this, I'm like, oh my gosh, she is so dull. It's just like, ugh, like, like, I don't know if that was like director's choice to go ahead and do that. You would just think that like Luke and Leia's mother would be a little more gutsy. Qui-Gon, Amidala, Jar Jar, and R2 decide to leave the ship, leaving Obi-Wan and the rest of Queen Amidala's personnel aboard the ship, and the Queen, as they think it's the Queen, and they don't know that Padme is actually the Queen, of course. What a twist! And they decide to go out to look for this part, the spare part that they need to get the starship going, and they're working against the clock because the people on Naboo are starving, because that blockade it's an iron grip blockade, their land's being invaded and such, so it's a very dire situation right here. And Padme says with the idea of like, okay, like I need to do what's best for my people here, but I also need to listen to what the Jedi have to tell me. From here, we're introduced to young Anakin Skywalker, who, like I said, not the best actor, kind of a dull character. I remember watching this film as a kid and not really feeling much for Anakin, kind of just being like, okay. I was all about the Jedis, man. And so yeah, that's how you get introduced to C-3PO. You learn that Anakin Skywalker is this slave child. He and his mom are enslaved. However, he is like a child prodigy for star racing and mechanics and designing and putting together pod racing ships. And he has a very strong will. He's a very strong will and determined child. There's something special about him. And from here, Qui-Gon catches on. He's like, oh, this kid has a different vibe to him. I think he's the chosen one, which is in a prophecy saying that the chosen one would bring balance to the Force. You get to meet Anakin's mom, Shmi, who I actually enjoyed in the film. I think she's probably one of the more interesting characters, even though she's not really shown in the film as much. And then I remember when I finally watched this film like maybe 5 years ago, then I realized, I'm like, oh, did they just like make a reference to Jesus? Because when you're a kid, you don't really think about those things. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there was no father. It was like one of those miracle births and stuff like that, which, okay, I don't think that was really necessary for the film. He could have had a father and it would have been just as special. His father could have died. I don't know, but it's happened, and we just go forward from there. So, of course, Qui-Gon wants to train this child, and he's, like, sending messages back to Obi-Wan at the ship, that being like, wow, there's something special about this boy, and that's how we learn about midichlorians, which I didn't understand what the big deal was about midichlorians until about 3 years ago when I thought about it. Yeah, what was so cool about Star Wars originally is, like, anyone could have the potential of being a Jedi. Like, it was the idea, I believe, before midichlorians were introduced, it was sort of this idea that the Force is this inorganic thing. It's difficult to explain, like some sort of like spirit, something that guides the galaxy together. And some people are more in tune with it, and those are the ones who become like Jedis or Siths. And there's some people who are less. The idea that there's midichlorians, that there's like some sort of organic, calculated reason as to why you are eligible to be like a Jedi or be Force sensitive, it's kind of silly. It took away from the magic that was the idea, this concept of the Force, that the original films worked so well and so strongly to kind of like give us that idea that the Force is there, anyone could have it. Qui-Gon wishes to free Anakin and his mother so that he can go ahead and train Anakin as a Jedi, since he believes this kid is what the prophecy is talking about. Qui-Gon gambles with Watto, who is the slave master of Anakin and Shmi, and he gambles saying, and the gamble ends with being that if Anakin were to win the pod race, they would get their spare part, and as a result, Anakin would be free also. But if Anakin lost the battle, then Watto gets the ship and they're stranded. Which, of course, Padme is very angry about it because Qui-Gon didn't consult with her on it, didn't consult with anyone else on it, and he just basically gambled away their chances. Like, what if Anakin wasn't the chosen one? What if he wasn't as good? And the fact also that Anakin never won a pod race before. It's a lot resting on the shoulders of a 9-year-old. I saw this movie in 3D. Yes, I was one of those people who paid to see this in 3D back in 2012. I thought the pod racing scene is fun, but it kind of gets boring because it's really like long and overdrawn, and it's the same shots from like left to right, left to right, left to right. There's a few odd like distinct camera shots, but the rest of it's like left to right, and that's really boring to watch. But it was cool to watch in 3D, and as a kid, like, I thought that was intense with John Williams' score going in there, and the tension that like this kid, like, if he loses and you know he's gonna win, but you're like, oh my gosh, like, he has, like, what if he does lose? Of course, Anakin wins the pod race, he's freed, but his mother isn't. And there's a sad parting scene with him and his mother, which I think is a very touching scene, where he's like, will I ever see you again? And she says, what does your heart tell you? And he's like, and he basically says, like, yes, I will. Which, if you've seen Attack of the Clones, you know it's going to be a horrible reunion. A horrible reunion that will kind of be one of the triggers to lead him down the path to dark side. Once the ship is repaired, they decide to head to Coruscant so Padme can meet with Senator Palpatine, who is the senator for Naboo. And essentially there's going to be a vote of no confidence, where if Amidala votes for it, then they will change the setup and Chancellor Valorum. That's what I gather. Still kind of confused on the politics, even though, like, I'm an adult now and I'm still kind of confused. So Queen Amidala decides that since it's going to take forever for the Senate to go through the process of voting and sending some sort of armed forces to go and end the blockade in Naboo, she decides to go back to Naboo on her own. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, one of the best parts of the Tatooine sequence is when you get introduced to Darth Maul. Oh my gosh, Darth Maul is the best part of this movie, who didn't get enough screen time, didn't get what he deserved. And that's one thing that Lucas did not do well with the prequels. He would introduce interesting characters or have this mystery surrounding them, lead up to them, and then they would die like that. Like Count Dooku, like General Grievous, and like Darth Maul. And like Jango Fett. So, and there's this cool, Darth Maul attacks them when they're trying to leave, attacks Qui-Gon while they're trying to leave for Coruscant, and that's when Qui-Gon realizes that, okay, this goes a little deeper. There is something, there is a Sith out there. This film, of course, downside of it, all the council meetings, oh my gosh, I remember watching this as a kid too and being like, I don't care. You don't even understand half the stuff that's going on. And even as an adult watching it, I'm just like, oh, this is boring. Like, I was looking at my phone at a lot of those council meetings and kind of listening to it in the background. I was like, this is stupid right now. Don't need them. There's different ways that in which a director can provide dialogue while giving a little bit of context to the storyline. That can be done through running shots. It can be done through some sort of action. It doesn't always have to be sitting down, and it doesn't have to be long and elaborated. It can be narrowed down. The audience, it's Star Wars. Like, the audience doesn't need like a 15-minute backstory on it. No, you can honestly just give it like 2 minutes in total and the audience is already on board with it. Of course, Padme returns to Naboo and she reveals herself to the Gungans as being Queen Amidala. What a twist! M. Night Shyamalan would have been happy with that. No, joking. Not gonna bring Shyamalan into this. Yes, which was the big reveal, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, and the Jedi are like, how did we not know? I don't know, you guys. It's one thing prequels did. Prequels did not show how strong and powerful the Jedi are, which is what they should have done. Okay, so they decide to create an alliance to take back the planet, in which in which there are basically 3 battles that happen in the 3rd act of the film. There's the Gungans fighting, there's what Padme and her troops are doing to trying to free the royal palace, and there is the like amazing fight between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul. Honestly, the Gungan fight, I think it's so cheesy and stupid, especially since it's like, I hate characters for comic relief in which they're simply klutzy and stupid, which is what Jar Jar is. So that whole fight for me, I think it's like the most ridiculous thing ever. I don't care for it. Watching it now, a lot of it, like, this movie is really dated. It's 1999, but it's really dated now, and that's because a lot of it is CGI. You'll probably find myself repeating this in all the other reviews of the prequels. Like, there's limited practical effects done in it, and it looks weird now. And it looked weird seeing it in 3D when I saw it. Anyhow, then there's the fight going on with Amidala in the Royal Palace. I think it's the most boring fight. It's basically them just sneaking around and then having a confrontation in which they're surrounded and by battle droids and destroyers or whatever those droids are called, and they kind of put down their weapons, and then eventually they hold Newt Gunray hostage. It's the fight. I'll admit, the reason why I used to love watching this movie as a kid is the fight between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Darth Maul. There is this huge lead up to Darth Maul. You see references to him in which Darth Sidious is like, I'm sending my apprentice Darth Maul to handle the matter. And you're like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? He's got horns on him. Who is he? Like, he looks amazing. And he doesn't say much, which is one of the best things about that character. He doesn't say much. He, action speaks stronger than words, and he is an amazing fighter. And he's got a dual-bladed lightsaber. I want that lightsaber. Anyhow, like, the music that plays, John Williams' score for Duel of the Fates, and it's like dun 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 dun, and then the Jedi are like, we'll handle this, and they take off their robes, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I've finally been waiting for, and it is totally worth it. This fight was well choreographed. You get to see the strength of the Jedi and like the fighting skills, which of course the original Star Wars films couldn't really do that because of technology that was available at the time. This was amazing. You could see all the fights, all the flips, the tension in between it. And you get to see how much of a badass Darth Maul is. He's taking on 2 Jedi, and he manages to kill Qui-Gon Jinn, which is probably one of the sadder moments of the film. But not too sad, because, like, if you think about it, how much do you know about Qui-Gon? Not very much. He's not, and that's another one of my big complaints of this film. The characters aren't very well developed. Like, Liam Neeson was, like, the main build actor for this film, and Qui-Gon he's, like, the lead Jedi. But, like, I can't tell you much about this Jedi from the film, because there wasn't very much said about him. And that's just a sad moment when Obi-Wan's like, no! And then he continues to fight, and it's so worth it when he slices Darth Maul in half. But when he did that, I was kind of like, why? Darth Maul was amazing. Like, it sucks. This character where it was just like this phantom character that was just like the lead up into it, like I was hoping, and every time I watch the movie, I'm still hoping that Darth Maul doesn't die because I want him to come back. The Clone Wars cartoons did a great job because they did bring back Darth Maul, and I love him in the cartoons. Like, they were able to add an interesting twist to that character and an interesting story. You get to see Dathomir, his home planet and stuff, and see his relationship with the sisters, which is what Ventress is. Okay, sorry, I'm geeking out right now. I will be doing a review, hopefully soon, on the Clone Wars cartoons, because I feel like everyone should watch that. Any Star Wars fan needs to watch it. Just anyone needs to watch it. It's an amazing cartoon series. So Qui-Gon dies, and Obi-Wan promises to his dying master that he will train Anakin, because when they were back on Coruscant, Anakin was denied training because he was too old, And the council, Jedi Council, thought that there was something weird about this kid, even if that was a prophecy. So, meanwhile, while everyone's fighting, Anakin's in his pod racer. Well, Anakin, of course, gets trapped in one of the Nabooian ships, and he goes up and he ends up destroying one of the Trade Federation ships, which I think is the most cop-out ending. He blows up the ship, and everything else just falls apart. All the droids are connected to the ship, so they all shut down, and that's how the movie ends. I hate cop-out endings like that, like Avengers. It's so stupid. It's like, okay, it's a huge Deus Ex Machina ending, basically. It's a cop-out ending. It's like, okay, like, we didn't think about this. Let's just kill this one set. Like, oh my gosh. Anyhow, I like the very ending of this film. The funeral is my favorite part. The tension in that funeral, and it's sad because you're seeing Qui-Gon's body burning, sorry. You see his body burning, but then it's the question, this mystery, like who was destroyed, the master or the apprentice, as Yoda, that as Mace Windu says. And then the camera just like focuses on Senator Palpatine's hood, and then you realize, oh yes, that's Darth Sidious right there. So there's still this mystery going on, and essentially the movie ends there. There's like a parade in Naboo, and they're all celebrating, and Anakin is going to be, he's a Padawan now, he's going to be trained by Obi-Wan. So all in all, I would rate Star Wars The Phantom Menace at probably a C+ or a B-. A B-. I would rate it a B-. It's a better film than Episode 2, but there's still a lot about it that kind of doesn't hold up. And the fact that it's the one film in the Star Wars saga that you can basically erase from the timeline and it still makes sense, doesn't mess up the timeline at all. Anyhow, if you have any questions or comments, what do you think of my video? Just leave them right down there in the comment section. And as always, live long and prosper.